Hey everybody, this is Eli from Elfbait, and welcome back. I've got today my old gaming buddy Scott with me to come on in and talk, just kind of chat general gaming, and maybe touch on one or two DMing tips. But yeah, I've been wanting to have some of my friends and fellow gamers on the show for a while, and Scott was free, so he gets to be my guinea pig. We are going to be enjoying our cold beverages, which I know is so professional, but it's been a long day. So, Scott, you and I have been gaming for a while. I think we met probably back when I was in my mid-20s, so like just ending college or like right out of college. Would have been almost 20 years ago, something like that.
Quite easily, yeah.
Yeah, it was before Nim was born.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And I know you lived, as at the time you were living on top of Atomic Games. You were like living in the apartment up there. Okay, cool. So, we've gamed off and on since then, not constantly, but I think I've run you in D&D games, and we played Marvel, the old Face Rip system and stuff like that. I know you're a GURPS guy, and I'll forgive you for that.
Star Wars.
And so Star Wars, yeah, we've done D6 Star Wars. There was the roommate house days,
yes,
the Garth house with the nonstop gaming. So, before that, though, I know you gamed a lot, and so what is your gaming background? I mean, how did you get into it?
My first system was D&D, like most people.
Yeah.
And I think I was around 13 when it was first introduced to me. A friend of mine, Sean, we were living in Moses Lake. He kind of latched on to me, and it didn't take long to find out that he was a gamer, and it was something I had actually never experienced before. So the introduction was his. The box set was his idea. And he had pulled a couple other friends. So we had a small group, and we started tackling a lot of the structured modules. One of the ones that I particularly remember was Queen of the Demon Web Pits.
Yeah, we were just talking about that, yeah.
And we did a lot of homebrew stuff. We built a lot of worlds. We actually tried to pull the full-on epic campaign thing of invading the 9 levels of hell once we got characters up high enough to try it.
Yeah, I think everybody does that when they're young enough. That,
Exactly.
It's like I remember trying to kill gods and stuff, going through the deities and demigods, picking almost like a catalog. I'm going to kill this guy today. So from D&D, you went on into other stuff. I know that you and I even played some of the White Wolf stuff at one point. We did, especially online. We got into that when we got into the
my next evolution from there was Star Frontiers, which was still when I was living in Moses Lake playing with Sean, and then we had a brief flirtation with Gamma World, and I found that really, really fascinating, but didn't find a lot of support or people who knew enough about it to make a
Gamma World's one of those ones where you really have to have somebody who really is into that setting.
Exactly.
And you also have to be willing to, I think, where a lot of people can't deal with it, is you have to be able to embrace that kind of gonzo attitude that Gamma World has, where everything's just crazy, and it's based after a really old school, even back then I think it was a little obscure context for what all of us fantasy gamers and sci-fi gamers, and face it, at that time, most of us, our only exposure to post-apocalyptic stuff was Jack Kirby comics, or Road Warrior, Thundar the Barbarian, which I think actually came out after Gamma World.
Oh god, I remember that show.
But so that, but even still, those were really obscure compared to the sum total of every fairy tale you ever grew up on, every King Arthur story, every Disney movie, whatever you ever had seen as a childhood, which all can, even before you get into Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and stuff, feeds into your fantasy stuff.
Exactly.
So yeah, Gamma World was just one of those ones. I knew lots of people played it. I played it through, I think, the first 3 editions, or I think the first 2, and bought the 3rd, but never had a chance to play it. But yeah, it was really kind of, you had to have people who were really into it.
Exactly.
And you get those crappy mutations.
I had some bizarre ones on my first couple of characters.
My character has an extra arm, and that arm is coming out of a really bad place. But
and then from there, we moved on to things like Cyberpunk, and that actually consumed a significant amount of.
I remember running those games before. I ran some of those for you, and I know I never got the chance to play in any of the games you ran, but yeah, running Cyberpunk until it became the real world.
Of course, Star Wars. Yeah, nowadays. And then, of course, the mushes came about, and I one of the realms in D&D that I had always had kind of a fun time flirting with was Ravenloft, and so that kind of laid the groundwork for making things like World of
And face it, if you were
interesting.
anybody who was anybody in the 90s, you couldn't help but at least dip a toe into White Wolf.
Exactly.
I mean, the chance to play the vampires and to play the werewolves. I really dove headlong into Werewolf and Mage. Those were my games. I never really bought in. I never really bought into the vampire thing. I guess I wasn't goth enough for it.
I had the same problem, but it was ironic too, because the very first White Wolf character I ever made wasn't a vampire. It was a mage stuck in a mush full of other vampires, and he was a virtual adept. And the way he tackled doing his spellcraft, he was one who basically constructed sign language as essentially a conveying tool for writing code. And did everything virtual reality.
The mage system was always just a really cool magic system. The ability to basically have... I mean, you needed a GM for mage to work right.
Exactly.
Because you had basically a toolbox. There were no spells. I mean, you could do the rotes and stuff, but yeah, I really loved about mage. It was really cool because you could just really build anything. Playing on the... Was it Dark Metal? Remember Dark Metal? Mm-hmm. And playing a mage in a cyberpunk world was such a cheat, because with the level of tech they had in there, coincidence was so easy to do. It's like, of course I'm popping metal claws out of my hands. I've got cybernetics. It's never mind. It's matter, magic. Or, oh, you shot me in the chest, and oh, look, there's metal under my skin. I'm a cyborg. It was really easy to cheat. I'm shooting fire out of my wrist. It must be a subcutaneous flamethrower.
Well, one of my favorite tricks for my mage was built a lot around forces and manipulation in that regard, but to make things coincidental, one of my first rotes that I created was essentially, oh, don't step there, which essentially then produced holographic bees from a hive apparently you didn't see in the ground, and then where they stung on the outside looks like a bee sting, but on the inside,
I remember once being logged on when a forces and correspondence mage used a hologram of a UFO to cover his teleport and call it coincidental. You could pull it off once. It was so far-fetched, but it was in part of the collective consciousness that he got out of trouble by making this fake UFO and then teleporting out of the field. And then the other one I remember was a matter mage, high-level matter mage, spontaneously generating an aerodyne vehicle and dropping it on somebody as an attack, because flying cars fall out of the sky, right? But they're buzzing above us all the time. Just so the coincidence was just like, you're just off the hook if you're a mage in dark metal, because with cyborgs and high tech on the line, you could just pull off anything. So the mushes came and went, and that I know that was a lot of where we played a lot of our White Wolf. And then there was then there were the years and years, when we had that big roommate house and you came over a lot. And those were more of the miniature years, I think. We did a lot of miniature gaming, but that was also a lot of Star Wars gaming and stuff. Lots of Star Wars gaming, because everybody in that house was into Star Wars. Not everybody was into D&D, not everybody was into White Wolf, not everybody was into Cyberpunk, but we were all into Star Wars. Yeah. So I remember a lot of Star Wars gaming.
And from there I also had, my other group that their big thing was they never fell in love with or were enamored with any one genre-specific game system. So that's where GURPS
we can't forget that we also played Rifts a lot, too.
Yes.
There was a lot of Rifts.
That's true.
Yeah.
But they're settled for, the fact that I don't want to be pigeonholed in any one system was to use GURPS, so they could basically use one set of rules and cascade it into whatever
You'll have to forgive him for liking GURPS.
It served a purpose.
GURPS is the one game system out of everything that I've played. I don't know. Maybe I have something against Steve Jackson, because I don't think I've played a lot of his stuff. Mm-hmm. I think I've dabbled with Ogre at one point, and I think I've played Bunnies and Burrows more than I've played GURPS. And didn't he do Toon?
Yeah, he did.
I think
Yeah,
actually
that was him.
Toon is the one I played the most out of anything that Steve Jackson ever made.
What was the name of that system?
Well, Toon was its own system.
Yeah, no, but there was another one that reminded me of. Sorry, I remember what it is.
Teenagers from Outer Space.
No, it was very, very quirky.
Well, there was Twerps.
It was all about shticks.
Shticks was Toon.
Toon did it as well, but that's not the one I'm thinking of.
Oh, I have no
Anyway.
idea. But yeah, so what are you gaming now? I mean, I know there was a long period where you were part of our regular group up here, and then that sort of fell apart. The last time you and I really gamed, I mean, you were in that big long D&D campaign around the time that Nim was born, where we did that for a while, and then there was lots more miniature gaming and board gaming for years and years. And then you kind of left the group for a while. You're kind of coming back actually into our circle. Well, at least my circle. You're kind of back into my orbit, I guess, or I'm in yours, or our orbits have crossed. I'm not that important. And so, yeah, I mean, that's I think something that happens to every gaming group. People come in and people go out, and for whatever reason. But the funny thing is that the people that you game with, I always find that whoever, no matter who you've gamed with in the past, unless they've done something horrible, like peed on your books or something like that, it's usually pretty easy to come back and start playing again.
Right.
Schedules providing, because I mean that's another thing that's kept us from being able to actually get games. We did that short Far Trek bit, and then schedules. You and Chrissy's schedules kind of didn't mesh right. Now she's a gamer too, right?
Limited experience, but
yes. She's gamer friendly. And she is willing to learn and play. I know
she played a little bit of White Wolf, and she played a little bit of D&D before the Far Trek.
Cool.
And D&D is probably right up there with the stuff that I've been doing of late.
So have you been getting any more gaming like with your other group or anything?
Not so much.
Okay. Well, so that's who you are as a gamer, and kind of. Now I know also you're a musician, and you've done some drama stuff.
Yep.
Has nothing to do with your current career, your day job. Just like my
No.
day job has nothing to do with anything. Do you ever find that it's like useful that like your music or your drama is useful as either a player or as a DM?
Oh, absolutely. I jazz trained since I was 7, but op trained since I was 4. So I've been doing some form of theatricals for a very long time. It's given me the ability to throw myself into whatever role, either as a GM or as a character that is called for at the time, including lists of traits, accents, etc. And I'm able to kind of adapt into those people, either when I'm running or as a character, to kind of keep things more realistic.
Yeah. So I know in your drama stuff, I know you've been on you've done like set production stuff, and I know you've done some performing, but you've also done some directing, or at least not the director, but you've been in like directorial positions.
I've been in directorial positions.
Yeah.
I've been in production positions.
So that's
I've
all
even
really
done
useful
some
too.
script writing as well.
Cool. So so like I imagine all of that is really useful as a DM.
Absolutely.
So like as far as forming stories or even controlling groups, because I mean, face it, as a DM, half your job is ringleader.
Exactly.
Or monkey tamer, whatever you want to call it.
And sometimes it requires a little bit of on the fly.
Yeah. The improv skills.
And I had actually kind of a fun example with that one. We were running a campaign at one point in time that literally crossed dimensions all the time, and there were multiple characters within that
was
party.
Your group's game? Yeah.
There were multiple characters within the party who basically, whenever they would show up at a new site, the first thing that they would do is essentially manufacture money by basically magically creating, whatever they decided they could sell in order to make sure that they were filthy rich in order to handle everything, which became kind of monotonous after a while. And so they ended up going to a dimension, and they went to their old bag of tricks, and they created their big mound of gems, and they went to sell them, and the person at the counter said, what am I supposed to do with those? They're created. They don't have any value.
So they're in a realm where they're wise tricks, so you can pass off the counterfeit stuff.
If you want to earn money here, you're going to have to find a way to earn it.
Yeah. So I know we talked a bit before the episode about, I know you've been watching the 30-day challenge stuff, and that's kind of where we started talking. But I know that I had talked to you about this thing that I've been kind of running through my head, which is kind of the responsibility of players at the table, and so kind of wanted to talk to you about that. I mean, as a DM and as a player. So one of the things I have always liked about you as a player, and this is why I really regret not being able to get you into a game yet, is that as a player, you are that guy that every gaming group kind of needs to have in their corral there, and that's the guy who's willing to basically play anything, and by anything I mean any system, and really any character, and not just that, but you're also willing to just bite at the not like stupidly follow every red herring
Right.
stuff. I mean, clearly red herrings can get set up, but you're that player that every DM really or GM really wants to have, and that's the guy who is willing to go ahead and play the game. And that's kind of what I was. So for me, I've been players. I think a lot of times players and DMs often run into the problem where we almost have gotten so serious about gaming in a lot of cases. I think both as DMs and not as DMs, but as players, and it's often a case of almost like this really weird kind of method acting, like, what's my motivation? Why will I do that? Why would my character do that? I don't want to go into the dark dungeon. It's scary in there. Of course, I'm not going to go into the Tomb of Annihilation. Who wants to go to the Tomb of Annihilation? It has annihilation in the name, right? But the problem I see with a lot of the problem with that is that and I always like to use the this is my catchphrase for that. At some point Bilbo has to leave the Shire.
Yes.
So if Bilbo doesn't leave the Shire, there's no ring that's found. We don't set off the event. We don't go through all of the cool stuff in The Hobbit. We don't set off the events of the Lord of the Rings.
And Sauron wins because nobody stopped it.
Well, and that is beside the point. I mean, what's happening in the background with the DM's pile of notes, which is really what Sauron winning, there's no adventure. So to have an adventure when you're sitting down to play D&D, the term social contract gets bandied around, and I think part of that is, as a DM, I'm agreeing to show up and create for you a setting, to give you a set of circumstances to buy into and invest in and go through. As a player, it's kind of your take in that is going to be to really play. You have to play your character. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, when you are playing a character, how is it that you go about making sure that your character is really just going to be part of the game? And I think part of a lot of people's problem is, and this is where I kind of want to look at it, I think a lot of people feel like they're cheating their character, or they're doing their character a disservice when they make him do something that might logically and realistically be against his grain. But I think in many cases they're not looking for the reason to. They're looking for why he wouldn't rather than why he would. So what do you do when you're playing a character to make sure that your character is a what can I do, not what can't I do kind of a character?
Honestly, I think my biggest approach to that is to kind of delve myself into the character's mentality a little bit and actually honestly look at both. Why wouldn't I, but why would I? Okay. What's at stake if I do it? What's at stake if I don't?
So how do you make sure that how do you make sure that the I'm not going to do it part of the character doesn't win?
It comes down to a couple of things. A lot of my characters, granted, I mean, they may have a darker nature here or there, but for the most part, they've got heart, and when it comes to push or shove, there's still that eventuality that the right thing eventually has to be done. and then you reinforce that basically by the interactions you had with the other players, the other characters, and the ties you had with them. And eventually it evolves almost into this mentality of, well, if I don't do this, not only am I letting down everyone in the grand story arc that's going to be affected by it, but I'm also letting these guys down.
Okay, so that's good when you. That seems like something that's really easy to do once you have an established character when you've been playing with a group for a while. But what about early on? Because I do see players who are new to the table. They'll come to the table. They've got that loner character, or they've got, the can. Even if they've got the can-do guy who doesn't want to work with others, he's not necessarily a loner, but he's like, I think I'm going to take it on myself or whatever. So early on, what are some things you do to keep from having that character who just doesn't do anything?
Early on, I think, is also that point in time where you are trying to establish who you are, not just for you, but to everybody else at the table. That's that point in the story where, you're going to bring to the table, this is how I shine, That's when the claws come out the first time. It's like, oh, apparently he has an adamantium skeleton. I didn't know that until 2 seconds ago, but ta-da, here he is. Okay. That's that point where those quirks that make your character of value to the rest of the party get to come out.
Okay. And so let's kind of devil's advocate or kind of a scenario of this. So when you have a situation where your character wouldn't do anything, like, okay, I talked about like the Tomb of Annihilation. So if the DM says, okay, here's the Temple of Death, the Temple of Doom, and you have a character for whom riches and treasure and fame are not the thing. Let's say you're playing that, and this is where I have a problem with it, because as a player and as a DM, I can never see any reason why you wouldn't. And I often feel like what is going on is the players who are doing this are so heavily invested in their concept that they're forgetting the game. And so, for example, like if you have that character who is a loner, I think you have to, like you said, you have to find those connections. You have to make a conscious decision as a player. And yes, you are making a concession to the game because it's a game. We're all here to play a game. So yes, reality is that loners often stay by themselves. Sure. Loners are generally loners in real life. But we're not playing real life loners in these games. We're playing these archetypical, like, fictional loners. And every loner who's ever, and I know I'm hedging on the loner, but it's a really strong example. Loners in movies and books and even stage and everything, they are always written much more dynamic than just I'm a loner, I'm going to stay by myself. They've always got some pull that pulls them back to other people, whether it's that the group is actually better for them, or deep down they're alone because something happened to them in their past. So is it a matter for you of like looking at your character's background and finding the reasons why they would associate with other people, why they would do things? Like you mentioned, like, what happens if I don't do this? Later on, when you've got an established adventuring group, it's easy to sit there and say, well, of course I have to do this. The cleric's healed me 12 times. I owe the ranger 50 gold. The barbarian's a really good guy. We've been adventuring. But early on, I find that it's more of an issue, like this character, this players. So is it just a matter of really just hedging on your background then at that point?
It's partly. You're hedging on your background a little bit, but also you've gotten, even early on, if you've gotten to the stage where you are traveling with these folks, even if this is the first day, we have just encountered, but we decided, we're all going to go east and we're going to do it communally. If something comes up on day one of traveling east, if I don't do my part, there is no reason for the rest of these people to have my back if something else happens and I'm still going east.
Okay.
So I've got to make sure that I establish the fact that I have your back in hopes that you will have mine.
Let me dial it back even more. What do you do when there's no reason that your character would travel that direction? Like, I say this because I've run into it in recent games where, we have to go this direction and there's one or two people in the party who are like, I've got to go this way, you've got to go that way. I run into it in the past, it's like, we need to go to the town of such and such. You're like, but everything I want to do is south. Now, there's a certain maturity. I feel there's a certain maturity and just acceptance that has to come in with the player. And of course, the DM can always steer things back. But it's very frustrating, I feel, as a DM and as another player, when you've got that guy at the table, or people, because often it's not just one player that's got their own thing.
It can be clicks.
It can be clicks, or you can have just everybody showed up with not a loner, but these guys with their quest. They have their private. And I remember it's really easy to fall into that with superhero games.
Yes.
Because superhero games, everybody's got their background, and unless you're playing a team, everybody's got some solo story. But I think D&D, back in the day, we all wanted to go on adventures, and that's why we sat down at the table. I don't think when you're 10, 13, the higher elements of drama and character building are really all that in your head. You just want to go on a quest.
Yep.
And it seems to be at a certain point in life as a gamer, a lot of people forget that. They get so bent on making an awesome character that they forget that we need to go. And I know I've said that a few times, but it's just like, so to me, I think that a player who's going to play one of these characters as the player, you really just have to, in the back of your head, say, I am going on this quest. I mean, and this sounds like self-help, look at the mirror. I'm an adventurer. I'm going on a quest. I'm going to enjoy my quest. It's going to be a good quest because I'm worth it. No, I mean, you're not doing that.
People like me.
Yeah, and exactly. That's got to be in your head because, we're all here to have fun. We're all here to go on an adventure. Now, granted, I think the better way to do it is to almost go the Bilbo route on it. Bilbo bitched and moaned every step of the way to Lonely Mountain.
Exactly right.
So if you're a loner, then have those times where around the campfire you're sitting there brooding. You're brooding. What do you do? And everybody else, the players are role playing, and this is where the other players come in hand. Don't let that guy do nothing. If you're a player and you got a guy in your group who doesn't want to be part of the party, don't let him. Force him to be a party. You're sitting around the campfire or you're at the table at the inn, and you're like, and I traveled to the wilds of the east, and I beat the mighty blah blah blah, and then you're like, and I slew the doobly-doo in the south. Hey, loner guy, what did you do?
Exactly.
And so then that player's going to have to either keep being a douche and sit there and go, I don't want to talk about it. But even if you're going to play that guy and you're going to go, I don't want to talk about it, you can still role play.
Exactly.
As long as you are still going to freaking Lonely Mountain, you can Bilbo your way all the way there and whine, bitch, and moan about how you miss your bed and how you want warm food. And, if you're that guy, if you're playing Bruce Wayne, the rogue, you can whine about how your parents are dead and how, you lost your pet dog and everything's bad. As long as you're doing it moving forward, I don't care. I think that's really, it's like, as a player, you have to do that. I mean, I've played outlaws. I've played characters who were ostracized. I've played dark, foreboding, broody people. I've played people who just don't mix in society. I mean, one of my superhero characters was this guy called the Mime. The guy couldn't even talk, but I still found ways to emote him and work past I built the character who is this way, but when I built him, I found a way to role play him. Part of that was a whiteboard where I draw little word puzzles to show what he was thinking, because I didn't want to write words because I was cheating, and so I do little word puzzles. They were often drawn really quick, and it was a kind of a Pictionary moment where the rest of the party would be trying to figure out what's going on. But it was fun. He was this kind of street level character. It was the 90s. The Crow was cool, so having a guy walking around in mime makeup was awesome. But so when you're playing a character, because I know you played Gavin in the one campaign, who was kind of I want to go on an adventure. I want to get out of the heat. So that's an easy character to play. But I know in the past you've played some other characters like who were a little bit more standoffish. I know like on the Mushes and the Muds, you played some kind of recluse characters and stuff like that. So how do you keep a character like that? You mentioned keeping in mind the rest of the party, but what is also some of the logic that you keep to keep yourself moving forward? I mean, internally as a player, to keep yourself from falling into that trap of collapsing in on your character concept.
Well, I think a lot of people kind of, who fall into that sort of loner character mentality, and you do sometimes see that somewhat patternistic, with those players. If you play with them more than once, it's kind of a reoccurring theme sometimes.
Yeah, they often have a favorite character. They may even have the same name.
They get hung up a little bit in. They put so much work into the backstory and all its complications and all its convoluted and all the things that it has created for their mentality and their state of being at the time that they enter.
Do you think that's kind of a case of maybe overbuilding their story?
Maybe, because what I think they do is they spent so much time architecting this backstory, they don't want to suddenly end this prematurely.
They've almost built like the sacred temple to their character.
Yeah, a shrine.
They don't want to defile the holiness
right, by
their character's
making the
background.
one mistake by going into the dark and scary cave too early,
or
and not surviving it.
Smiling at an NPC. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and
so there's this built-in fear factor of I have this reputation to uphold, and I don't want to prematurely end myself when I put all this work into it. But the problem with that mentality is that the backstory is just that. It's the beginning, the epilogue to the story you're supposed to write in the game.
Yeah.
And so...
You mean prologue? Say he's done.
I came here from work.
That's okay. That's fine. But no, it's
so. I mean, you've got to take that with the grain of salt that it deserves, and realize, okay, well, here's the story that I'm supposed to be writing now.
Yeah, and it's not even loner characters. I don't think. I mean, loners are easy target to pick on. The loner's the lone wolf. But there are other characters, I think, that are so attached to their concept, or the players are so attached to their concept that also limits they also allow it to limit their player. Like the paladin, who, if it's not a grand quest, he's not interested. If it is just, he can't find a way to work his character into the skullduggery. I mean, okay, so the adventure is we have to sneak into this place under questionable terms. Clearly, I mean, it's a little easier in 5th edition now that paladins don't have to be lawful good, and they're not as tied to alignment, and it's more their oath. But a paladin's a good example. Clerics are another one that often this is against my religion. Well, there's a certain point where you have to concede that you have to do stuff.
The act, maybe, of concealing yourself may be against your religion, but why are you concealing yourself? Are you doing it to do a noble act your God would be in favor of? Then you gotta find a way around it.
Well, yeah.
Every story we have ever followed and drawn us into liking gaming in the first place is ripped all across the board with that one guy who did that one thing that is so out of character to himself, but that's the linchpin that changed the story.
Yeah, and some of those holier than thou characters, I think a lot of people who play paladins forget characters who are really down and dirty. I mean, if you look at like Solomon Kane, he's a Puritan witch hunter. I mean, really, he's supposed to be this holier than thou. I would call him a paladin. He just doesn't wear plate mail.
Yeah. Type
of character, and he's down and dirty all the time. He's sneaking and he's lying, and he's doing the. I mean, I think with a using the paladin as an example again, you just have to there is the greater quest. There's also, hopefully if you're a paladin in a game, the DM is taking that into account. And this, of course, was where, the whole Session 0 comes into. This is a game of lying, cheating, and stealing. Well, I want to play a paladin. Probably not the best choice. But, you know, I mean, you even see, like, with thieves, I'm not going to go get in a fight. Here's the other, and that leads into kind of the other thing. If you're going to limit your character's actions, maybe at least increase your role play. Think of, was it Malik? I think it was from Conan the Destroyer.
Yes.
He never wanted to be in a fight, but he's still an interesting character. He still moves the plot along, and at a certain point, he's like, "Oh, I got to go help," or you know, he's like, "You know, what are you doing over there? I'm helping," you know, and so yes, the character wasn't statistically like up there, but he was at least an interesting character. The character was still there on the adventure, and at a certain note in the story, he comes out and shines. And that's the other thing. So if your character is, if you're going to play your character in the way that is not necessarily committed to the quest, at least maybe, you know, commit your role playing to the quest. Like I said, grumble and whine along the way. And this is the other thing. Find a way. I mean, the one thing that really just find a way. It is up to you as a player, and this is why kind of going back to the original point, which is player responsibility. It's your responsibility to find a way for this to work for your character. You have an absolute obligation to the game and to the people you're playing with to come up with a reason for your character to do that. Sure, you're wanted in that kingdom. There's no good reason for you to go there. Logically speaking, why would you go to that kingdom? Well, because what we have to do is there. And, you know, the people who... this is where having common backgrounds and having some shared stuff from the party can also help too. If you want to make a loner character, fine, make a loner character, but have ties with somebody in the party, or have ties to places, or have a soft spot. I think anybody who's going to make a character who's going to have some sort of really tight, like, limiting factor should build themselves an out. If you are the cruel bastard, maybe you like puppies, you know, oh no, we can't help, but there's a dog in that burning building. Okay, cool. You know, if you're a thief, you know, yes, you will rob anybody, but maybe you love your mom. You know, kind of a thing, you know, sort of a thing. But there's just too many times where good games are ruined, I think, because a player won't do anything.
Well, and I think it's a good thing too to, you know, take that kind of as an opportunity to challenge that player's creativity. Straight up, you don't want to do this, you know. That gate looks formidable, and going through it obviously is not on your first list of things. All right, offer me an alternative that gets you on the other side of it. How are you going to tackle
classic DM's question? Classic DM's question. What do you do?
Exactly.
And put it in their court. You're literally putting the ball in your court.
Well, and take it a step further. You know, someone in the party going, "Look, Bob, we still need to get to the other side of it. How do you want to do it?"
Yeah.
You know, challenge that loner. Okay, show us your creativity. You're sitting there breathing in the corner. You're not doing anything to help us anyway.
Yeah.
What would you do? How would you fix it?
Yeah, using the Bilbo analogy. That's Gandalf talking to Bilbo and saying, "Hey, you know, I get it that he's comfortable here, but do you want to be the guy, or do you want to be this guy?" One of
my favorite, you know, analogies for that in a story that most of us are probably aware of, Wrath of Khan. We know by genre Vulcans don't lie.
Yeah,
but they can exaggerate.
Yeah, they can exaggerate.
And that was a creative loop around something that was racially, historically understood and didn't actually break character.
Yeah.
But that exaggeration changed the plotline.
Exactly. You know, he can exaggerate, he can be selective, he can... I mean, I think Spock has come up with maybe a dozen different reasons to lie over the years.
Exactly.
Or Vulcan characters, period. I wouldn't say Spock but I mean, between... you know, Tuvok and Spock and Sarek and Savick and, you know, all the other characters that have ever shown up, I think we've had enough reasons where they've been able to lie. Yep. But they just haven't called it lying. What is it? Right. They even had that one character in Next Gen, I think it was, who dissembled. The guy that, he didn't lie, he dissembled. He just flat out, you know, he was lying, but he just called it something different. And you know, and that's the thing. I mean, you know, if you're gonna play a loner character, or if you're gonna play the bumbling wizard, because see, the other thing too is sometimes
some restrictions.
Yeah, somebody with restrictions, because don't play the blind character without having an idea of how you're going to function.
Right.
It's really up to you as a player to come up with that. I mean, it's great to be, Tyrion making a dwarf character and knowing that dwarves are ridiculed and reviled in the world that you live in. Because we're not talking about, Misty Mountain dwarves. We're talking about, human dwarves, humans with dwarfism. Who, most medieval settings are looked on as either fools or have some sort of negative content. At least make that character a freaking social genius, and he's really wily. Or make sure that he doesn't give enough of a shit about his dwarfism to where he lets it be a hindrance of his own. It's like, you could play that drow character, just spitballing here, and play that drow character who's on the surface. Yes, everybody sees what you are, and if you're in a world where drow are known, they all hate you.
Yeah.
And if they don't know what you are, you're a black-skinned elf, and you're like dead of night black-skinned elf, and you're just weird. So that people are gonna. I think I ran a game where it was the weirdest party. We had a centaur in the party, and then we had this is way back. We had a centaur in the party. We had a lizard man in the party. We had an elf in the party, and we had a 3-creen in the party.
Oh, wow.
It was like the first time in 2nd edition when they came out with rules for playing monsters, and of course everybody wanted to play a monster.
Of course.
So that was a weird... I mean, they tried to go to villages, and they couldn't go in, but, they would still try. But we're kind of more to the point here. The elf and the 3-creen, on paper, should have been very bitter enemies. 3-creen at the time were, they liked to eat elf meat. Elf was a delicacy to the 3-creen. And so, why would they be in a party? Well, they were in a party together. And so it became kind of this constant rivalry between the two of them. The 3-creen was never actually going to eat the elf, but he would sit there and trick the elf into thinking that he was eating elf cakes or whatever. He would just he would run this sort of comedic rivalry. And so there, while that could have been an impasse to a game, like there's every reason the elf could have been like, I'm not traveling with him. Great, well, there goes our game. Or the 3-creen could have been like, I eat the elf. He's got to sleep sometime, buddy. No, they don't. Unfortunately, elves don't have to sleep anymore. But yeah. So I mean, I guess to kind of bring it in, we were kind of hitting the mark here. To bring it in. When it really comes down to making sure that players are playing their character, regardless of what the character is, what is, I think, kind of in a nutshell, like the one piece of advice you would give?
Don't just be true to your character's mentality. Be true to the game, too. Be a part. Take all of that temperament that your character created from that big monolith of backstory that you created, but make sure that there's a reason in that backstory for the game, for the story to continue. To write the story that you're actually supposed to be doing now.
Yeah, I was telling somebody at work today, and I'm like, you just role play that shit. I mean, if your character has all this negative stuff, if your character doesn't want to go down that hallway and everybody else wants to go in the hallway, don't argue with the players. Don't stonewall the players. Argue with the character. Have your character argue. You'll get a role-playing moment out of that.
Exactly.
You'll get into the moment and you'll have fun. So,
some of the greatest adventures I've ever had as a GM, we didn't go anywhere. We spent literally an hour actually sitting around the campfire having an argument. No actual storyline at that particular point advanced. But there was so much character interaction, it actually helped take a lot of that
my last
out.
2 game sessions for my Monday game have been role playing. It's been like investigation and interaction between NPCs and players. So that was as a player. So as a DM though, what would you say is if you have a player who is very much he seems to basically be really set on method acting his character. What is your best advice to DMs who end up with this guy at the table or woman or whomever, at their table. It's a person at their table who's this player at the table who doesn't want to play their character, wants to play their character so true to character that it's actually becoming disruptive to the group.
I'd say that's the one you gotta challenge. The one you're gonna ask a few more times than maybe everybody else at the table. What is it you want to do, and how would you do it? And then key off of those responses. If you get the deadpan response of "I don't know," throw the same challenge at the one next to him, and then throw in the fact he's not doing anything. How does that make you feel? Spark that creativity.
Yeah,
Spark
ask those
that
questions of the players where, like, okay, so you guys are all going into the temple, but the cleric doesn't want to go in because it's of an evil god and he doesn't want to have anything to do with it. What are you guys doing?
Right.
You leave him standing outside? I mean, I literally have had one. I had one game where I had one character, and I felt bad about it, but the player was so dead set on playing this character. And in this case, it was the physical nature of his character that was the limitation. He wanted to play a giant. And he was playing a Firbolg, and the Firbolg, this is back in second edition. Firbolg, at a certain level, they can change shape, so they can change self, and they can actually get smaller and human sized. But he wasn't that level. But he was dead set on playing this Firbolg, and the kid that he was a mid campaign substitution, and he was dead set on this character, just playing this character. So I let him play the character, and he spent like 2 whole sessions standing outside these caves because he couldn't fit. So he's really just like standing. I'm like, all right, you wanted to play this character. I mean, I felt bad as a DM that he wouldn't go he couldn't go into the dungeon, but really he wouldn't fit. Nobody in the party had any means to do it, and this is one of those times where really, we all challenged him when he's making a character. All the other players are like, hey, really, dude, a giant. I'm like, you realize you don't have this ability by such and such level. Well, we're only going to be, I think I was letting him, because it's a mid-game, substitution, I let him make like a 3rd level character, but it's like a 4th level or whatever that they got the ability. He was like 1 level away. But yeah, it's just, as a DM, challenging those players. I totally agree with that. I mean, if you've got that guy who's constantly going to be doing that, the only other thing you can do is try and find ways to make adventures. And the other, I guess, the soft way that would be to find a way to maybe make 1 or 2 adventures that are geared towards that character. Mm-hmm. So, because if you've got one player who's not really who's playing to type way too tightly, but the rest of the party is super flexible, then when you have that adventure where he's, it's about him mm-hmm. and his mode of life, let's go back to the loner for a second. Mm-hmm. If that loner is super loner and he's got a background because he's a loner because everybody he's known has died and all his loved ones were killed and mm-hmm. Jabba the Hutt is after him and Darth Vader's got him, whatever, Star Wars or D&D or whatever, that's fine. So make an adventure where that past comes back to haunt him, and then the rest of the party comes and helps him. Now he can't deny it.
Exactly.
I mean, if you put him front and center, and then the rest of the party jumps in and helps him, or goes to that place where
it's a lot harder for him to.
I got to do this by myself. No, we're not gonna let you do this by yourself. We're a band of brothers. We're gonna go with you. I don't want you with me. We're going anyways. Okay, cool. We go on this adventure. He's like, well, thanks, guys. Grumble, grumble, grumble. It's exactly. all. But the next time, maybe not only will the character be better put in position, but the player himself may have seen. Okay, I get it. It's about finding ways, and sometimes that's a personality thing. And if it's really the person, then may fortune favor you because you're really gonna have a hard time changing the person.
Yeah.
But anyways, so yeah, that was that's kind of the topic I wanted to cover. Thanks for coming in to the garage and talking at the old fridge right here. So snacks are going to be here after we're done. But anyways, thanks for tuning in to this first episode of Elfbait with a guest. This is Eli, and this is Scott. We're going to probably talk a little bit after the camera's done, but really appreciate you guys checking it out. Like, share, and subscribe. Leave your comments below. There's a place for that down there. And I'll be continuing with the D&D 30-day challenge all the way for the rest of probably into the end of this month and maybe into the start of next month. And I think Scott is going to start doing some posts of his own. I don't know where you're going to put that, or probably just on Facebook or something like that. But
Possibly.
if you want to throw them up in the Elf Bait group on Facebook, if you want to share with people, that's fine. But so yeah, thanks for coming by, guys. Get out and game.